They say the mirror never lies. But what if, in the Middle Ages, people believed the mirror was not just a tool of truth, but a dangerous trap? A trap for your soul, a doorway for demons, and a curse waiting to strike. Imagine standing in a candlelit chamber in the 14th century. The air smells of smoke and damp wood. A polished bronze mirror hangs on the wall, reflecting your face, the fire, and the shadows flickering across the room. But before the household sleeps, someone approaches with a cloth, draping the mirror carefully, almost reverently. Why? Because in the medieval imagination, to leave a mirror uncovered at night was to invite terror into your home. This wasn't some quaint superstition. To people in the Middle Ages, mirrors were mysterious, dangerous, and often feared. And tonight, we're about to uncover why. Before we dive deeper, let me ask you, would you dare to stand in a darkened room and stare into a mirror at midnight? Would you trust that only your reflection stares back? If you felt a shiver just imagining it, then subscribe now, because the history we explore here is darker than what they ever taught you in school. Now, let's step back in time. For much of the Middle Ages, mirrors weren't made of glass as we know them today. Instead, they were crafted from polished bronze, silver, or obsidian, volcanic glass. These weren't household items for everyone. They were rare, precious, and often associated with wealth, power, or sorcery. To own one was to possess something that blurred the line between the ordinary and the supernatural. That rarity only amplified their mystery. For most medieval people, their only experience of reflection was in water, a pond, a river, or a bucket. But water reflections were unstable, shifting, easily broken. A polished mirror, however, showed something different, something unnaturally precise. Your face, staring back with impossible clarity. For many, it was unsettling. It was as though another version of you lived inside that strange piece of metal or glass. And that's where fear crept in. In folklore, the reflection wasn't just an image. It was thought to contain part of your soul. To gaze too long at your reflection was to weaken yourself, to risk leaving some essence of you trapped in the mirror. Some even believed the mirror itself could steal life, draining vitality the longer you stared. Physicians of the medieval world, influenced by ancient Greek and Roman theories of the humors, sometimes warned that mirrors could upset mental balance. Looking too deeply into one could, they claimed, disturb the humors and invite melancholy, madness, or even possession. This belief led to real behaviors. People didn't casually stare into mirrors, and when the sun set, fear multiplied. Nighttime was already seen as the hour of demons, ghosts, and wandering spirits. To leave a mirror uncovered was to leave a doorway open. And so, across Europe, people covered their mirrors at dusk. Not for cleanliness, not for beauty, but for survival. This practice became especially urgent in times of death. Medieval tradition held that if someone died in a room with an uncovered mirror, their soul could become trapped inside. Families, desperate to ensure their loved one found peace, would rush to shroud every reflective surface. Imagine the scene: a candlelit room, a body lying still beneath a shroud, and every mirror hidden away in cloth. They weren't just mourning, they were protecting the soul of the dead and the living. But where did these fears originate? Some traced them to Christianity itself. Medieval priests warned that mirrors could be tools of vanity, but also of the devil. They were thought to reflect not just the physical world, but also the invisible. Demons could use them to slip into your home. Witches could use them to summon dark forces. Theologians wrote warnings, and ordinary people whispered rumors. Never let a mirror face a sleeping person. Never stare too long. Never leave it uncovered when night falls. And there were stories, terrifying ones. One 12th century monk wrote that a nobleman in France swore he saw a figure moving behind him in his mirror, but when he turned, the room was empty. Another tale from Germany claimed a mirror once showed the face of a plague victim in a house untouched by sickness. And days later, the disease struck. In rural villages, peasants smashed mirrors after nights of nightmares, convinced they had glimpsed the faces of the dead in their reflections. And these weren't isolated fears. Across cultures, similar warnings appeared. Ancient Roman writings spoke of mirrors capturing souls. Jewish folklore cautioned against uncovered mirrors in homes where someone had died, a tradition that, in some communities, survives to this day. Medieval Europe took these ideas and deepened them with its own obsessions with sin, demons, and death. The fear of mirrors was also tied to witchcraft. In the occult practice of scrying, mirrors, or polished crystals, were used to see visions of the future or to summon spirits. To the church, this was heresy. To ordinary people, it was terrifying proof that mirrors weren't just passive objects. They were tools, portals, weapons. A witch with a mirror was someone who could reach beyond the visible world. And yet, fear coexisted with fascination. Just as people feared mirrors, they couldn't resist their strange power. Nobles commissioned elaborate mirrors, decorated with religious imagery to protect against evil. Alchemists experimented with reflective surfaces, hoping to use them to glimpse hidden truths of the universe. Scholars argued over whether reflections were natural phenomena or spiritual ones. But the ordinary villager, living in a thatched roof home, didn't think about philosophy. They thought about survival. And so the mirror remained something to be hidden at night, covered after death, and feared in silence. Think about the medieval mindset, a world where the Black Death killed millions, where disease and famine struck without warning, where death was an everyday presence. In such a world, anything mysterious carried a weight of dread. And what could be more mysterious than the mirror? An object that seemed to hold a second self, an object that stared back when you stared into it. Even today, echoes of this fear remain. In parts of Europe and beyond, some people still cover mirrors after a death. Superstitions persist about mirrors falling, breaking, or being left uncovered at night. And across the world, horror stories about mirrors continue to haunt us. Perhaps that's why horror films so often feature the mirror scene, where the reflection lingers just a moment too long, or shows something that isn't really there. The medieval fear of mirrors may sound strange, but maybe it isn't so irrational after all. After all, a mirror doesn't just show us as we are. It shows us doubled, inverted, uncanny. It shows us truths we don't always want to face, okay? And if you were a peasant, a monk, or a noble centuries ago, would you really risk leaving that door open at night? So let me ask you again, tonight, when your room is dark and quiet, when the only light is the faint glow of the moon outside your window, will you glance into your mirror? Or will you cover it, as our ancestors once did, just in case? Because history teaches us something unsettling. They didn't laugh at these fears. They lived by them. They believed mirrors could kill, curse, or capture. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. The truth may never be fully uncovered. But perhaps the next time you pass by your reflection, you'll remember the medieval warning. Beware the mirror after dark. It shows not only your face, but what waits beyond. Okay? And if history was rewritten once, it can't be rewritten again. Subscribe, because here we uncover the truths they never wanted you to know.